It's Wulf, and earlier this year, in my free time, I played through the game Hot Wheels Unleashed, but it left me with a lingering question. Where am I? And by that, I mean, where does the game take place? In Hot Wheels Unleashed, you drive Hot Wheels cars around tracks that are built in areas that resemble real-life places. And as I drove my Hot Wheels collection along these tracks, I couldn't help but wonder what country the game took place in. And this is probably due largely in part to the fact that I'm moving countries very soon in real life, but I also realized that the levels are so detailed that there was probably little bits and pieces that I could piece together to figure out where the tracks take place. When I first started looking into this, I originally only focused on the college campus level, and at first I thought that it was going to be a really simple, straightforward video to make because of that. However, when I started looking at other levels, I realized that things got pretty complicated. Nonetheless, let's start by looking at the college campus level. One of the most obvious and quickly apparent things, which the college campus level shows us about where Hot Wheels Unleashed takes place, is that it's in an English-speaking area. There's a whole bunch of writing all over this level, and it's pretty much all in English, with the only exception being some of the school books which are laid out across the level are in Latin, but it's just the lorem ipsum placeholder text that's used pretty much everywhere, so I don't really count that. And anyway, in a college campus, it's not super uncommon to find other language books laying around. The corkboards around the campus, though, really indicate heavily that this is an English-speaking area, because it wouldn't really make much sense for posters and things like that to be in another language if it's not the spoken language of the area. And the corkboards in particular show us something really important about the spelling of a specific word. On one of the posters on the corkboards throughout the level, the word theater is spelled Theatre. The thing with the word theater is that the spelling of it can vary slightly depending on which country it's being spelled in. Some countries, like the UK, spell it Theatre. However, some countries, like the US, spell it Theater. But even still, this isn't a perfect indicator of what spelling is actually proper in the area Hot Wheels Unleashed takes place in, because sometimes, for artsy reasons, different places will still spell it with the RE at the end, even if the country that it's in spells it ER normally. Regardless, from this and various other things you'll see later on in other levels, we can assume that the language of the area we're in is English. So that narrows this down to English-speaking countries. And the language of all of the stuff within the level, like the posters and whatnot that I showed earlier, do not change if the game's overall language is changed. So English is definitely the language of the area the levels are in. The other useful thing I found in the college level was power outlets. Strangely enough, the college campus level is the only level, at least in the base game, that appears to have any outlets at all. And the outlets are specifically Type B power outlets. Or at least they appear to be Type B power outlets. I'm not totally sure if the T-shaped hole on there makes it a non-Type B power outlet. I couldn't really find anything about that specifically on there. But nonetheless, I'm considering it Type B power outlets. And even if it's a different type of power outlet, I think that it's still same regions use those outlets overall anyway. Figuring out that Type B power outlets are present actually helps narrow things down quite a bit, because they're not as common as one may expect. They're mostly used in North America, Central America, parts of South America, and the Caribbean. However, there are also some places in Africa, Asia, and elsewhere that do use Type B power outlets. But nonetheless, from just the college campus level, we know that Hot Wheels Unleashed takes place in an English-speaking area that has Type B power outlets. And originally, that was where I was going to end the video. I was just going to say it probably took place in Canada or maybe the Caribbean, because English-speaking Type B power outlets and spell theater with an RE. But I decided to go ahead and look at the other levels in the game and realize that things were more complex than just that. The next level that I decided to explore was the basement level. There were only two real things that I noted in this level that kind of helped narrow things down a little bit. Firstly, there's another corkboard with a bunch of English advertisements and posters and things like that on it, which furthers the idea that this is in an English-speaking country overall. Although the college campus already showed us that English appeared to be the main language of the area that the game takes place in, sometimes college campuses are a little bit weird. And by that, I mean that there are some universities in some areas that use an entirely different language to teach and do everything in than the area that they're actually located in. However, given that there's English outside of just the college campus level, it indicates that the area overall does use English as the main language. The other thing I noted in the basement level that actually sort of was not helpful but still of interest is that there's some arcade games in the basement, and on the coin slots on them, there's not a currency symbol. Normally, in a lot of places, there is a currency symbol on the coin slot to tell you how much you actually need to put in. And so here in the US, it's normally like a dollar sign and then 0.25 for 25 cents. And I think in other areas, they probably would have different symbols for euros or pounds or whatever currency is used. But on these games, there's no indication of the currency whatsoever. So overall, from the basement, we have learned that English, again, definitely seems to be the language of the area, but the currency is entirely uncertain. And I know that the basement level is kind of customizable, but I don't really think I've actually done that much customizing in the basement in my game, so this is mostly how a vanilla basement looks in this game. Next, I looked at the skate park level, and the skate park level actually has something really interesting in it, which is some license plates. At first, I noticed this truck, which has a rectangular license plate. Now, different countries around the world have different license plate shapes, but usually they are either rectangular, like the one on this truck, or they're longer and thinner, which are used in a lot of places in Europe. But then, I zoomed the camera in on a parking lot off in the distance, and I realized that some of the cars in the parking lot actually did have that other style of license plate that is the longer, thinner ones. Yet some of the other ones also still had the more rectangular ones. Another thing I looked for in this level but couldn't really quite see any indicators of is if I could see what side of the street the vehicles drove on or what side the driver's side was in the vehicles, because if I could see if the cars drove on the left or right hand side of the street or if they were left hand or right hand drive, that also would have narrowed things down. But as I said, it was kind of unclear because there's not any moving traffic in this level, and the way the vehicles are parked, they're kind of parked all over the place, so that also doesn't really show us anything. Anyway, up to this point, we know that it is an English-speaking area, that they use Type B power outlets, and that they have two different license plate styles. In the garage level, there were two more things which caught my attention, which were tires and spray paint cans. I thought that the tire code on the tires might give some indication of where the game takes place, but I didn't really see anything. The tire code that's used on the tires in this garage is abnormal. It's not really a real, standardized tire code, so it didn't really indicate much of anything. At least not to me. If you guys see anything in it that's important, make sure to let me know in the comments. On the spray paint cans, there's a warning label, and it's very hard to read the warning label, but you can do it if you get the camera at just the right angle so it's clear enough. And I thought that there could possibly be another word somewhere on that warning label that would give an indication of what spelling that they use in the area, but I couldn't really find anything. But then it occurred to me that right on the front of the can, the word color is spelled C-O-L-O-R. This is another thing that's a regional spelling difference. Some places, like the US, spell color C-O-L-O-R. Some places, like Canada, though, spell it C-O-L-O-U-R. So this is another thing that indicates something about where the game takes place. The odd thing about this is that it kind of conflicts with what I showed earlier about the spelling of theater. A lot of places that spell theater with an R-E will spell color with an O-U. So the fact that there's a mismatch here either indicates a unique dialect, or it could prove the possibility that I said earlier that the theater spelling was just a way to be fancy, because some places and areas that spell theater with an E-R will spell it with an R-E just to stand out. And that brings us to the final level in the base game of Hot Wheels Unleashed, which is the construction site. I only found one thing of note on the construction site, but it is pretty notable. It's a bag of cement, and in particular, it's the fact that this bag of cement uses kilograms to show its size. Kilograms is part of the metric system, and I know that here in the US, I looked it up actually, bags of cement are measured in pounds, so definitely not just an industry thing. I know some industries of certain things use the metric system even in areas where they use the imperial system and stuff, but this definitely seems to indicate that the game takes place in an area which uses the metric system. And so, what do we know at this point about where Hot Wheels Unleashed takes place? Well, we know that English appears to be the primary language of this place, and that they spell color C-O-L-O-R, and theater possibly T-H-E-A-T-R-E. They also appear to use the metric system and have two different styles of license plates in this area, that being the rectangular style and then the longer European-ish looking ones. I made a list and I tried to narrow it down, but I still am really not sure what country this game takes place in. I started by finding a list of countries that use Type B power outlets, and it seems like a pretty complete list, but I'm not totally sure if it was entirely accurate. But I started with that, and then I went through and I eliminated countries on there based on other criteria that they didn't meet. So, for example, the US was taken off the list of possibilities because the metric system is not used there, and Mexico was taken off the list of possibilities because English is not an official language there. So in the end, my list of countries that Hot Wheels Unleashed could take place in consists of Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Canada, Cayman Islands, Guam, Guyana, Jamaica, Micronesia, Montserrat, Netherlands Antilles, Nicaragua, Palau, St. Kitts and Nevis, Turks and Caicos, and Venezuela. And I'm not really sure how to narrow that down anymore, except for the license plates thing. But the thing is, it's actually kind of hard to find pictures of license plates from some countries online, and honestly, I'm not really sure if any of those countries do two different license plate styles, so I'm not sure which country could be best suited to match the description of all of the things we narrowed down earlier in the video. One interesting outlier to this whole thing, which was not actually included in that previous list, but that kind of meets a lot of the criteria, is Puerto Rico. According to Wikipedia, you supposedly can get European-style license plates in Puerto Rico, which is interesting, but also makes it match up with the license plate thing that I said earlier. Also, Puerto Rico does use Type B power outlets. The only thing is that Puerto Rico doesn't necessarily have English as a recognized language. The thing is that Puerto Rico is part of the US, and so English is sort of a recognized language, but Spanish is by a majority spoken in Puerto Rico. But I looked it up and I actually found the University of Puerto Rico website, and you can look at it entirely in English, so what I was saying earlier about the university having everything in English could still be possible in Puerto Rico. The only thing that I guess wouldn't match up would be the metric system, but then again, the cement bags being metric doesn't necessarily mean that the entire country uses the metric system, because sometimes you just get stuff that's in metric even in places where the system is not metric. Like, I live in the US and I know I see metric system stuff, measurements sometimes anyway. So in the end, where does Hot Wheels Unleashed take place? Seemingly the Caribbean? That seems to be where most of the countries that I've narrowed it down to are, and it makes sense because mainly the Type B power outlet and English language thing, but it still also could be somewhere else. And since people from all over the world watch YouTube, I figured I'd make a video about this, and at the end pose the question of, where do you guys think Hot Wheels Unleashed takes place? There's probably some of you that live in a country that maybe exactly matches all of the stuff that I've mentioned in this video that I didn't think of or didn't have on the list that I narrowed it down to or anything like that. And make sure to let me know in the comments. Or if there's other aspects of the game that perhaps give indicators of where things are taking place, make sure to leave those in the comments as well. Nonetheless, thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you in other stuff in the future, and bye-bye.